The air in Federal Courtroom 3B was thick with tension, a mix of anticipation and unease. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on polished wood and the faces of everyone present. In just 9 minutes, a moment would unfold live, searing itself into the national consciousness. Justice Clarence Thomas, a man known for his stoic silence on the bench, delivered a verdict before the trial had even formally begun. His deep, resonant voice cut through the quiet murmurs of the packed room, landing squarely on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "Treason," he declared, the word reverberating like a gavel strike. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion, broadcasting the confrontation to over 22 million Americans glued to their screens. He spoke of prison, of consequences severe and irreversible. The courtroom held its breath. Everyone waited for the defense, the outrage, the inevitable crumbling of composure that such a grave accusation seemed to demand. But no one, not the uneasy senators in the back rows, not the press corps leaning forward with pens poised, not even the formidable Justice Thomas himself, was prepared for her response. Jasmine Crockett hadn't entered this courtroom to plead innocence. She came armed with a truth so potent, so long buried, that it had the power to challenge authority itself. Tension had been building since the heavy oak doors creaked open minutes earlier. A hush fell immediately. Conversations dissolved mid-syllable as all eyes swiveled toward the entrance. Then she appeared. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett moved with deliberate, almost unnerving calm, completely alone. No high-priced lawyers bustling behind her, no aides clutching binders, no protective detail, just her. Her silhouette was sharp against the light of the doorway, clad in a tailored navy blue suit, professional and understated, yet revealing the storm behind her eyes. In one hand, she carried a worn brown leather briefcase, a symbol of purpose rather than mere paperwork. Her hair was pinned back tightly, chosen for control, not vanity. The rhythmic click of her heels on the marble floor cut through the silence, each step precise, slicing through the tension like a scalpel. She didn't glance at the sea of faces, curious senators, calculating press, whispering onlookers. Her focus was absolute, locked on the defendant's table ahead. Whispers erupted behind her, like scattered embers. Is that really her? Alone? Defending herself? Speculation mixed with pity, morbid curiosity, and thinly veiled political glee from those expecting a dramatic collapse. Some snickered softly, anticipating a breakdown under pressure. Reaching the table, Jasmine placed her briefcase down gently, the worn leather contrasting with the sterile courtroom. She opened it slightly, giving only a glimpse of its contents, before folding her hands calmly on top, composed, centered, and unerringly unshaken. At that moment, the front doors opened again. Justice Clarence Thomas entered, draped in the heavy black robes of his office. His presence carried the weight of history, a defining moment in his legacy. His expression was set, jaw tight, gaze sharp, devoid of warmth. He bypassed customary formalities, eager to begin. Before the room had fully settled, his voice rang out, clear, commanding, and undeniable. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," he began, each word delivered with icy precision. "This court is in possession of classified evidence indicating that you willfully withheld military intelligence related to Operation Hollow River." He paused, letting the weight of the operation's name linger in the air. "You are hereby accused of treason against the United States of America. You will answer under oath." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. One woman in the gallery dropped her pen with a loud clatter. A veteran reporter muttered, "What the hell?" loud enough for several rows to hear. A ripple of uneasy laughter followed. Not joy, but disbelief so sharp it seemed to hang in the air. It felt like the opening act of a meticulously orchestrated political execution. Some faces smirked, others shook their heads in disgust. An aide in the back discreetly pumped a fist under the bench. To many, it seemed Crockett's career was about to be incinerated, live, on national television. But the woman at the center of the storm didn't flinch. Jasmine stood slowly, deliberately, her chair scraping faintly against the stone floor. She placed her hands flat on the table, looked directly at the nation's most feared judge, and asked, her voice low yet powerful, "Are you sure you want this?" The question was neither loud nor conventionally defiant, but it landed with the force of a physical blow. It was certainty, not desperation, the kind that rattles your spine because it is rooted in something real, something unshakable. The room froze, truly froze. Even Thomas faltered, if only for a fraction of a second. His lips parted slightly, eyes narrowing. Not just in anger, but in sharp, sudden calculation. Somewhere beneath the robes and years of authority, he must have understood. Jasmine Crockett wasn't walking into a trial. She was walking into a war. And the weapon she carried in her unassuming briefcase was something the court, and the nation, hadn't yet comprehended. With all eyes fixed upon her, Jasmine reached deliberately into her briefcase. The faint click of the latch echoed in the cavernous silence. Jurors leaned forward, reporters held their breath, expecting legal briefs, motions, or some procedural counterattack. But what she drew out was not bound in legal blue backing or stamped with court seals. It was a single letter, frail and weathered, folded into thirds, its creases deep and softened from repeated handling. The edges were feathered and curled. Dog-eared corners revealed years of use. A faded fingerprint, perhaps ink, dirt, or tears, marked one side near the fold. A pale brown coffee stain bloomed along the bottom edge, and a tear ran diagonally across the main crease, repaired with yellowing tape more than once. This was no ordinary correspondence. It was a vessel of memory, an artifact of profound grief, held and possibly wept over until it became nearly sacred. Jasmine didn't raise her voice or manufacture drama. She held the fragile paper in both hands, letting its vulnerability speak first. "This is not evidence," she said, her tone steady and low, yet charged with unshakable conviction. "This is a truth we were never meant to see." And just like that, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted irreversibly. The courtroom was no longer a stage for political maneuvering or legal posturing. It had become a quiet, almost reverent space, a place where silence might finally speak, where long-ignored voices could finally be heard. Jasmine unfolded the letter with a care reserved for something sacred, smoothing each crease, tracing each line as if committing it to memory one last time. Then she began to read aloud. The room descended into stunned silence. "My name is Mara Wilkins," Crockett read, her voice steady yet carrying an underlying rhythm, the echo of another woman's pain. "I am the mother of Private First Class Darius Wilkins. He was my only child." She paused, brief but heavy. "He died 2 years ago during an army operation. They told me nothing." The simplicity of the words struck hard. "They came to my door with a flag and 3 uniformed men. They called him a hero. They said he served with honor, but they never told me how he died. They never told me why." A quiet shiver passed through the crowd. A journalist froze mid-sentence, fingers hovering over the keyboard. One senator, arms initially crossed, leaned forward, suddenly intent. Crockett continued, her words tightening like a vice around the hearts of those listening. "I asked questions. They said it was classified. I begged. They said it was for national security. But when I closed his bedroom door that night, the silence screamed louder than any official explanation. I knew something was wrong. Deep in my bones, I knew they were hiding something." A ripple of discomfort spread through the gallery, a shared recognition of bureaucratic walls built against grief. Yet Jasmine's voice remained steady, drawing strength from the ink on the page and from the mother who had written it. "For months, I couldn't sleep. I started dreaming about him, hearing his footsteps on the stairs again. I'd smell his shampoo in the empty hallway. Sometimes," her voice caught slightly, "I'd think I heard him laugh just for a second downstairs, and then remember he wasn't coming back." The line landed like a physical blow, breaking through any remaining detachment. Sniffles began subtly, suppressed at first, then spreading. Tears filled the eyes of those who had arrived expecting political theater, not raw, universal human sorrow. Even hardened skeptics, arms crossed and waiting for a career to implode, felt a crack of empathy. This was no longer about Jasmine Crockett. This was about a mother's unanswerable grief. "I'm not writing this because I want someone punished," Crockett read, her voice carrying quiet weight. "I'm writing because I want someone, anyone, to tell the truth. I want someone to say my son mattered. That his life wasn't just a statistic buried in redacted reports." Jasmine paused deliberately, letting the silence fill the courtroom, heavy and thick as water in a sealed chamber. When she finally lifted her gaze from the last line, the atmosphere had transformed. Smug expressions were gone. Scoffing smiles had vanished. Detached curiosity had given way to something heavier, more uncomfortable. Jurors sat frozen, transfixed, some mouths slightly ajar, others staring down, eyes glazed, struggling to contain emotions they could not name. One juror, a middle-aged man later identified as a retired Navy veteran, pressed his thumb into the corner of his eye, staring intently at the floor as if willing himself not to break. A court reporter's fingers hovered uselessly above the keyboard, frozen. Even the gallery, filled with seasoned pundits, political operatives, and hardened cynics, was completely still. What had begun as a high-stakes political trial now felt like a solemn service, attended by witnesses forced to confront a loss they hadn't anticipated. No one dared break the silence. Not even the judge. Somehow, without raising her voice, without hurling accusations or citing a single law, Jasmine Crockett had done the extraordinary. She had made a room full of powerful, often jaded people feel something deeply human. Not for her, the accused, but for a mother they had never met and a young man they would never know. She folded the letter gently along its worn creases, as if tucking someone into bed, and placed it on the table. Her hands, so composed moments earlier, now rested still. In that stillness, the letter revealed a mother's raw grief and exposed the wall of silence surrounding Darius Wilkins's death. Yet Crockett knew, and the room seemed to acknowledge, that grief alone, even at its most powerful, would not dismantle entrenched systems of power. She needed evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof to challenge the official narrative. With another soft, decisive click of her briefcase latch, Crockett opened it again. The anticipation in the room shifted. The raw emotion lingered, but now it was layered with sharp intensity. What else did she have? This time, she didn't pull out something delicate or personal. What she produced was cold, printed, official. A stack of government documents. The cover sheet read clearly, declassified, top secret, Operation Hollow River. The heavy black top secret stamp had been crossed out, but the weight of its original classification still clung to the pages. She placed the stack neatly on the table before her, her movements precise and practiced, as if rehearsed countless times in silence. Judges and clerks craned their necks. Cameras zoomed in. They had expected political theater. They were now confronted with something far more dangerous. Undeniable evidence. "I'm entering these into the public record," Jasmine announced, her voice calm and steady, measured like a surgeon preparing for a critical incision. "These are not rumors. These are not opinions spun for media. These are federal records, unsealed just 7 days ago." A few cynical snorts came from the back rows, muttered whispers clinging to the idea this was a performance. But Jasmine ignored them, her focus absolute. She lifted the first page, holding it slightly forward. Operation Hollow River glared at the top in bold black font. Below it, columns detailed timestamps, geographic coordinates, unit designations, and mission protocols, the dry, exact language of military operations. Sections once hidden under thick black redactions were now fully visible. She deliberately flipped to a second page, drawing attention to a specific entry. Her voice clear and measured, she said, "This report was filed exactly 48 hours after Private First Class Darius Wilkins was officially declared deceased." Her finger traced a line midway down the page. She read aloud slowly, distinctly, subject showing signs of life during extraction. Breathing shallow. Field medic notified. No follow-up recorded. A heavy silence followed. Another beat passed. The revelation settled over the courtroom like a suffocating storm cloud, hitting with the weight of undeniable truth. Darius Wilkins had been alive when they found him. The stifled laughter from earlier vanished completely, replaced by shocked silence and uneasy shifting in seats. This wasn't a bureaucratic oversight discovered years later. It wasn't a vague, tragic battlefield miscommunication lost in the fog of war. This was a specific observation recorded in an official report, followed by nothing. A deliberate omission noted in black and white. A life potentially lost not just to injury but to inaction, later erased with the stroke of a black marker. A juror, a young woman near the front, let out a small involuntary gasp, quickly covering her mouth. The court clerk stared at the document in front of her as if it had suddenly become radioactive. One reporter in the front row, a man known for his unflappable demeanor, mouthed the word Jesus. His professional detachment momentarily shattered. Jasmine laid out another page without comment. This one bore a logistic signature block from Strat Defense Solutions, the private military contractor previously mentioned in reports about the operation. Their faint corporate logo was visible. Beneath it, a breakdown of medical equipment allocations for the extraction team. Highlighted were discrepancies. A missing portable defibrillator, an unlocked emergency field kit near where Darius was treated. The carefully constructed narrative of an unavoidable casualty was collapsing, replaced by a chilling mosaic of negligence, missing equipment, and a stunning failure to act on reported signs of life. These official documents painted a damning picture, not just of operational failures, but of a potential conscious disregard for a soldier's life. The air grew colder. The silence heavier. But the next piece of evidence Crockett produced wasn't buried in redacted files. It was hiding in plain sight, a snapshot that connected the dots of a potential cover-up, shockingly implicating the man presiding over the case. Jasmine reached deliberately into her worn leather briefcase. The movement was loaded with significance. This time, she didn't pull out another document. She held up a printed photograph. The quality was candid, grayscale, slightly grainy, but the subjects were unmistakable. Two men sat at a round table in what looked like an upscale restaurant. Plates of food before them, wine glasses mid-toast, smiles on their faces. On the left, Justice Clarence Thomas. On the right, Leonard Kenner, CEO of Strat Defense Solutions. Jasmine said nothing further. The photograph spoke for itself. Conflict of interest, compromised justice, hidden influence. Clarence Thomas shifted subtly in his high-backed chair. His face, usually an impenetrable mask, showed a small crack, tightened eyes, a hardening jawline. The faint smirks and whispers of cynical amusement that had surfaced earlier vanished entirely, replaced by stunned silence. This was no longer political theater. It was the uncomfortable possibility that the system designed to uphold justice might be entangled with the very interests it was supposed to oversee, potentially burying not just files, but human lives. The photograph landed like an explosive charge, shattering the illusion of judicial impartiality. The documents had raised questions about the operation. The photo raised questions about the judge himself. The case against Crockett, built on accusations of withholding intelligence, was now completely overshadowed. Evidence against the official narrative and possibly those upholding it mounted relentlessly. But the cold documents and the revealing photograph told only part of the story. The true human cost of Operation Hollow River was about to step into the light. As if summoned by the weight of unspoken truth, the heavy courtroom door at the back creaked open. There was no announcement, no ceremony. Heads turned instinctively. Cameras didn't flash, but every eye locked on the figure making her slow, deliberate way down the center aisle. Eloise Wilkins, Darius's grandmother. She was small, barely over 5 feet tall, tightly curled gray hair framing a face etched with sorrow but marked by resilience. She leaned on a simple wooden cane, its soft click echoing Crockett's earlier heels, but carrying a different profound resonance. The sound of endurance, of grief carried across years. She didn't tremble. She wasn't intimidated by the imposing courtroom or the powerful figures within it. There was a steel in her spine that unimaginable loss had failed to bend. Jasmine looked up from the defendant's table, and for the first time that morning, her remarkable composure seemed to falter just slightly. A flicker of shared understanding, perhaps shared pain, crossed her face. Without a word, she stepped aside near the witness box, an unspoken invitation. Eloise Wilkins didn't ask for permission. She reached the stand, adjusted the microphone downward with a slow, deliberate movement, cleared her throat softly, and then looked directly, unflinchingly, at Justice Clarence Thomas. Her eyes, though aged, held piercing clarity. Eyes that had seen too much, buried too much. "I buried my daughter," she said, her voice quiet but carrying a firmness that cut through the silence. "Years ago." Then, almost imperceptibly, her voice hitched. "I buried my grandson, Darius." No one spoke. No one moved. "And the only thing I've ever wanted since," she continued, gaze unwavering, "is to know what happened. Not what they put in a form letter. Not what they told reporters. What really happened." She reached into her simple purse and pulled out a photograph, worn at the edges from years of handling, a tangible link to a cherished memory. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it up. It showed her grandson, Darius, younger, smiling broadly in his crisp army uniform, standing beside a rusty sedan. A faded bumper sticker on the car read, "Proud Army Mom." "He loved that car," Eloise whispered, her voice thick with memory. "Said he was going to fix it up nice when he came home." She paused, swallowing hard against the emotion constricting her throat. "But he never came home. And they never told us why." Her voice finally broke on the last word, not collapsing into weakness, but fracturing under the unbearable weight of 2 funerals and 0 answers. The courtroom was enveloped in a silence unlike before, not just respectful, but heavy with shared accountability, the collective guilt of a system that offered flags and condolences while withholding the truth. The next voice belonged to a woman with short, practical auburn hair and eyes that carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. She wore a plain navy blazer and clutched a small, unassuming folder in her lap as she took the witness stand. Susan Hale. Her name initially meant little, but her introduction made her significance clear. Former Army nurse. Her service record spotless. Credentials impeccable. Yet her face betrayed a different story, a quiet burden, a memory she clearly wished she didn't have to carry. "I was on duty the night Private First Class Darius Wilkins was brought in," she began, voice barely above a whisper, compelling the courtroom to lean in, straining to hear the words she seemed reluctant yet compelled to speak. "They told us. It was classified. We were not to ask questions. Everything was under control." She paused, taking a deep breath, pressing her palms together, fingers interlaced as if praying for strength. "But I saw him." Her voice cracked, professional detachment giving way to raw emotion. The courtroom stirred with a low, uneasy murmur. He was still breathing. The words confirmed the horrifying implication of the document Crockett had revealed earlier. Life signs noted, but no follow-up recorded. Susan Hale had witnessed the follow-up, and it had been ignored, silenced. I remember, she continued, tears spilling down her cheeks, her gaze distant, locked on a memory playing before her eyes. And he kept saying, "Tell my mom I'm okay." Her lips trembled as she struggled with the words. Over and over, like he thought if he said it enough, someone would listen. Someone would make it true. Her voice dissolved into a choked sob. No one answered him. No one came. And he died alone. A journalist in the front row lowered her camera, hand pressed to her mouth, tears glistening in her eyes. A juror gripped the armrest, knuckles white. This was no longer mere testimony. It was a confession, the unburdening of a soul. Susan Hale appeared haunted, a woman who had waited years, perhaps decades, to speak this truth aloud, regardless of consequences. Eloise Wilkins's dignified plea for truth, followed by Susan Hale's devastating eyewitness account, stripped away layers of bureaucracy and classification, revealing the raw human tragedy at the heart of Operation Hollow River. Their words were heart-wrenching, painting a picture of loss, potential negligence, and profound institutional indifference, resonating far deeper than any legal document or photograph could. The weight of their testimony hung heavily in the air. Then, as if completing a dark, undeniable equation, Jasmine Crockett delivered the final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. The piece tying the tragic outcome directly to calculated suppression at the highest levels. With the emotional impact still settling over the stunned courtroom, Crockett subtly nodded to a technician standing discreetly at the side. The main courtroom lights dimmed almost imperceptibly, drawing attention to the front. A low hum emanated from the speaker system, followed by a brief crackle of static. A beat of silence stretched, amplifying the tension. Then a voice filled the room. Calm, cold, calculated, utterly unmistakable. Clarence Thomas. If the mother pushes too hard, leaks something about a protocol violation, it'll shut the story down before it spreads.